What's Gucci squad, what's Gucci family, Young Don Mega, and I'm back at y'all with another reaction / explanation type video. Today this is going to be the backstory behind the Napalm Girl. Napalm Girl, I'm putting that in quotations because a lot of people may not know what that means. Me personally, I don't even fully know what it means, so we're gonna go ahead and learn together. All I know is that it is a picture and it is the thumbnail that you clicked on, and it's the backstory to this girl running from what looks to be soldiers trying to kill her. And without further ado, we gonna get straight into it, man. 3, 2, 1.
The photograph known as Napalm Girl is one that is synonymous with the Vietnam War. The use of napalm as a weapon was used widely during the conflict, with this photograph showing the horrific effects. The young girl, Phan Thi Kim Phuc, is in the centre of the photograph, having removed her napalm covered clothes. But what is the story behind such a famous photograph? Kim Phuc was only 9 years old when the photograph was taken. She and her family lived in the town of Trang Bang. By 1972, America's role in supporting the South Vietnamese against the Communist North had been going on for decades. From 1966, it was believed by the American military that any victory in Vietnam was not possible. Yet, the war continued. In June of 1972, the North Vietnamese army captured the town of Trang Bang. Many of the civilian population fled to a nearby Buddhist temple to hide from the fighting. Kim Phuc and her family were amongst them. The South Vietnamese Army and Air Force engaged the North Vietnamese. Both forces initially kept clear of the temple, though by the second day of fighting, this was no longer the case.
They probably went in there,
Airstrikes were carried out at designated points, as marked by coloured smoke by the ground forces. Napalm bombs were being used with conventional bombs. For those that are unaware, napalm is a type of firebomb. It is a gel-like mixture that burns as hot as 1000 degrees Celsius and is designed to stick to a surface, whether it be metal, concrete, or human skin. Although it was developed during World War II, it is a weapon synonymous with the Vietnam War. It saw widespread use where it was employed to destroy the jungles in which the Viet Cong hid. With the fighting becoming ever closer to the temple, those inside decided to flee. A small group of people, included Kim Phuc, fled the temple, making their way towards the South Vietnamese forces. Just as the group fled, they were spotted by South Vietnamese planes from an ongoing airstrike. The group was mistakenly seen as North Vietnamese troops launching an attack. Kim Phuc happened to be towards the front of the group as the plane dropped its bombs, so she managed to survive. But 2 of her cousins behind her were killed, along with 2 other villagers. However, her back was covered in napalm, burning through her clothes. As Kim Phuc ran down the road, she removed her burning clothes, attempting to reach the South Vietnamese forces with a group of other children who had survived the bombing. Nick Ut, an Associated Press photographer, was amongst the South Vietnamese soldiers and captured photographs of Kim Phuc running towards him. Kim Phuc recalls upon reaching the soldiers, they began feeling her back burn and screaming that it was too hot, too hot. She was taken to a hospital in Saigon by Nick, where the vast third-degree burns on her back were deemed to be fatal. But after 14 months and 17 operations, she was able to return home. But it would not be until 1982 and further operations in Germany that she was able to regain some mobility. Despite this, the injury was long-lasting. Damaged nerve endings left Kim Phuc in agony as they would often misfire. Even decades later, she still needs operations to deal with the injuries. The Associated Press initially refused to accept the photograph as it displayed nudity. but once accepted, it was quickly awarded the Pulitzer Prize.
Yeah,
The reaction of President Richard Nixon upon seeing the photograph was initially suspicion. He believed that the photo was staged in a bid to humiliate the American involvement for the war that had failed. When Kim Phuc was 11 years old, she was able to return home. When she did, she was presented with the infamous photograph by her father. Nick Ut had visited her home and presented a copy to her father. She recalls the embarrassment of being naked around her family members, singled out as the only one without clothes. Dealing with the psychological impact of the photograph on top of the physical trauma is something that no one should have to deal with. On top of all this, Kim Phuc was used by the North Vietnamese government as a propaganda piece showing the horrors of war. She was made to give countless interviews and pose for yet more photographs. It was only in 1986 she was able to study in Cuba. It was there where she met Boy Ho Ton, who she would go on to marry in 1992. On return from Moscow for their honeymoon, the flight stopped in Canada. It was there where the couple applied for asylum, which was granted. In Canada, Kim Phuc built a family and attempted to turn the negative of the photograph into a positive.
Yeah.
She established the Kim Foundation International, a charitable organisation to help the child victims of war. She travels around the world, giving speeches on forgiveness, on healing, and on letting go of hate. A link to the foundation's website will be found in the description. She is still to this day in touch with Nick Ut. Very often when looking into human conflict, it is easy to forget the civilian casualties. At best, the people in the wrong place at the wrong time, or at worst, those deliberately murdered. The photograph of Napalm Girl is one that reminds us of such horrors. Very often it is just accepted that civilians will die or be injured in the course of war, labelled as collateral damage or other such euphemisms. Perhaps Nixon's initial reaction of disbelief lays bare to the lack of understanding of war by those who decide that the war is worth waging, unable to comprehend the suffering that is inflicted. Or perhaps it shows a callous or deluded nature of a man who could not believe such suffering was possible. Either way, it is Kim Phuc's resolve in the face of such suffering that we should remember. Although the burden of such a photograph should never have been placed on such a young person, Kim Phuc has been able to rise above the horrific injuries and events of her childhood, and I would argue that the world is in a better place for her being able to do so.
Very true. Hey man, that was another reaction from Young Don Mega, and without further ado, I'm out.